Hey all, AK here. I've teamed up with Vespers to bring all of you some free new tutorials and free production tools. If we haven't connected before, I'm a music producer based in San Francisco. I'm into glitchy, funky bass music, and I learned to do it all from quality sites and resources like vespers.ca. You can learn more about me on my website, aktunes.com, or check out my trainer profile back at vespers.ca. Don't forget to click this link and grab the free download so you can follow along with this tutorial. All right, let's get to the good stuff. You don't have to be good at math to be a good producer. However, you're probably aware that behind all of these pretty knobs and dials, there's some seriously complicated math going on. Don't worry, we're not going to get all mathing crazy in this video, but I am going to talk about some magic numbers that come up over and over again in music production, and show you don't actually have to remember them to use them effectively. This video's download is sort of an oddball. It's basically like a reference guide that's designed to be used inside of Live's browser. Basically a grouping of folders so that there's a structure that makes sense. So when you unzip the download, put the root folder somewhere where you can find it, and then use Live's add folder function inside of places to get this directory structure added to your browser. It may appear confusing at first because there are no files in any of these directories. The folder names are what's important and they serve merely as reference text. That said, what I've done for you here is actually quite useful. Basically, this can be like your own little production wiki that you consult when you're doing different types of things. And you can use it without ever having to leave Live. I'll quickly take you through one use of each folder, which I think will probably demonstrate the value of all of these subfolders. And you can freely modify what I've built so you can come up with your own magic numbers. BPM to MS. Time in music can be measured in the absolute, as milliseconds, or ms, and time can also be measured relative to the song's tempo, 1/16th note, 1/8th note, etc. Some devices with internal envelopes will not let you snap to a relative rhythmic value when dialing in your settings, but it forces you to use absolute time. In some cases, you may actually want to use rhythmic values on these parameters, for instance on the attack knob of the sidechain envelope of a filter that's being triggered by the drums. If you look at my directory, each folder contains a formula with which you divide by the BPM of your tune, and the decimal you get back is the amount of seconds for that rhythmic value in milliseconds. So if I want a quarter note at 140 BPM, I do 60 over 140 over the BPM, which is about 0.428, so 428 milliseconds is where I want to dial in my attack. Because we are rounding, it's not perfectly precise, but more often, for me, this is just the range I'll start in, as I find that dialing envelopes slightly off of perfect rhythmic time often creates a bit more nuance. Use the same procedure for any formula or time in the list, and add your own if you're so inclined. Genre, BPM. This might be a tad contentious, but I'm including it as a guideline, not as gospel. In this folder, you'll find a list of BPMs by genre. Again, this is not so much to define what genres are in which BPMs, but more to aid you when you're trying to set up the BPM of a project and decide what feel you want to start with. How you finish, well, that's all up to you. And my list is just a start, so add your own. Perfect intervals. This is kind of a quirky one. When using Live's transpose feature on warped or unwarped audio clips, I found there's a couple magic numbers that tend to work well because they are mostly perfect intervals from the tonic. There's a few in parentheses that aren't actually musically perfect intervals. However, these numbers reflect the second or the ninth, which are the same. And in the diatonic system, the second note of the major and minor scale are the same. Anyway, when doing transposition like this, it may be helpful for you to bring up this chart rather than randomly trying values, or worse, going up by one semitone and hitting play every time. You might be able to tolerate it, but if you make music in a house where anyone else is living, this is a surefire way to drive your roommates or partner crazy. Keys. While these aren't exactly numbers, I chose to include them anyway because I think it's useful to have. Using this tool is extremely straightforward, even if you don't have a music theory background. Choose your key, major or minor, Note that I've only included a couple of keys here, but these are the ones I primarily write in. And just leave the folder open when you're writing, so you have a constant visual reminder of the notes that are in key with your song. I've also included the relative major or minor to the scale you're looking at in case you want to do an easy key change, or think about your melody from a different perspective. It's a very simple idea, but I find that it's pretty effective for keeping my sound musically consistent and teaching me the notes. Mixing. This one I also fully suspect to be contentious, especially by those with real mixing experience. Of course, there is no straightforward answer on how to mix because every track is different. However, there are guidelines, and what I've done for you here is constructed a series of notes to consider when you're mixing. Obviously a tad subjective for my taste, I like to think about my mix kind of like adverbs. In other words, the mix helps describe and qualify how the music is doing what it is. So the way I use these notes is when I'm listening back, I'll say to myself, these drums are sort of too boxy. And then I'll look back at my chart, read 500 hertz for boxiness, and that'll be the starting point for where I make my EQ adjustments. Or I'll be listening to a bass and say, this sounds muddy. So I'll look to make a cut around 240 or 300. So this tool's mostly for reference, but it does help you start thinking about mixing decisions in a more practical way, and it forces you to justify your own decisions while you're making them. So if you can't articulate what sounds wrong in your mind, you're probably not ready to start fixing it. If my chart helps you get there, well, that's amazing. More than likely, you'll want to use my adverbs as a benchmark or template for your own. Then customize the folders to reflect the truth in sound that's true for you. If, in fact, music is fundamental to the universe, and we're all vibrating at a slightly different frequency, then maybe, just maybe, through deep investigation, you'll be able to discover your own magic frequency. However, I honestly think, whether you're aware of it or not, it is the journey of all producers to find sounds that make you feel the most. That's all for this video. If this was useful to you guys, do us the favor of liking this video so we can bring you more. Also, make sure you click this link to grab a free download of all the files we built in this tutorial. Vespers.ca has a huge library of production courses and free tools. Synth patches, samples, templates, racks, productivity tools, interviews with world-class producers. It's an amazing resource for you to level up your production skills and find your chops with legit quality resources. So come and join us back at the site, and stay tuned for more freebies.